When we talk about election integrity, we are talking about the security, transparency, and trustworthiness of election technology, law, and administration. That's a lot to chew on. So in order to break it down into smaller chunks, I'm using a framework that was developed by the OSET Institute and also discussed in reports by the Brennan Center. These sections focus on election integrity by framing on the possible attacks on an election. This is important to us because the integrity of an election, put simply, is how well it is protected from an attack. Now, OSET defined three types of attacks on elections: defamation, disruption, and subversion. Defamation is disinformation or political strategies to delegitimize or undermine confidence in the election. This can be domestic or foreign in origin and is primarily spread by social media. News coverage can, and often does, further disseminate this information through poor coverage strategies. Now, to be clear, OSET and the Brennan Center define these categories of political attacks, election attacks, as things that foreign states could do. I am taking that framework and saying in my work that these are avenues by which domestic political actors and also domestic criminals could also seek to interfere in the election. And as I'll show throughout this presentation, they've done so. Now, disinformation should be differentiated from the political strategy of running smear campaigns to decrease voter interest in an election. There's a fine line here. The George H.W. Bush smear campaign of Michael Dukakis with the Willie Horton ad, for example, would likely count as a smear campaign, but not go so far as to be an attack on the democratic process itself. Now, Russian operatives planting fake stories in American media, organizing rallies for and counter rallies against polarizing political candidates, purchasing ad space on social media sites to make fake claims, and using computer programs to spread conspiracy theories on social media to undermine American democracy are all examples of defamation that happened in 2016. I expand this international focus to include false claims made by politicians in the United States, which are aimed specifically at undermining trust in the electoral process. We've seen that very recently with the President Trump's and his son Eric's Twitter comments following the chaos of the Iowa Democratic primary. In a country that honors free speech and money in politics, and that communicates primarily, it seems, through social media these days, we do a poor job of enforcing political norms, combating defamation, and combating defamation. The next type of attack, which is disruption, is the act of interfering with the normal process of an election. The electronic poll book malfunction in Durham County on election day in 2016 was disruption, for example, though it was an accident, not an attack. The failure of the e-poll books caused long lines, kept the polls from opening for several hours, caused an unknown number of voters to leave the polling place without casting a ballot, and invited distrust of an accurate result. Power outages or alternate election night reporting results would also count as disruption. The great fear of disruptive actions is that they can be widespread. If North Carolina's state one-stop voting system network is compromised, which is the system for the e-poll book check-ins during early voting for almost every county, the entire state would be affected. However, there are also domestic disruptions to elections that have hyperlocal effects and should not be ignored. These typically manifest as intimidation tactics, where hyperpartisans stand near a polling place and intimidate potential voters for the other side. This could also manifest as a pronounced yet unnecessary police presence at a polling site, which is precisely what was seen in Gwinnett County, Georgia during early voting, Sunday early voting, in which local Black churches bussed members out to vote. They encountered at the early election site 6 police cars with their lights flashing and officers either in the car or standing outside of their car surrounding the election site based around the corners of the parking lot. Anything that interrupts the normal process of voting to turn voters away from the polls or prevents the regular reporting of results is a disruption. The trouble with disruption is that it's very difficult to quantify. We will never know how many people decided not to vote in Gwinnett County that Sunday or in Durham 2 years prior. The final attack method, the one that haunts the imagination of computer scientists, conspiracy theorists, and increasingly of politicians seeking airtime, is subversion. Subversion is a direct attack on voting equipment to change votes by digital intrusion. There has never been proof that subversion has happened in an American election in the modern age. There is ample proof that it could happen and that errors in voting machines have changed the outcomes of elections. And that has been found in small elections, most famously in one in New Jersey, where there are few enough people who voted that every single voter in that election could be interviewed to see whether they actually voted and who they voted for, to fairly easily identify that the machines had flipped the votes for the two candidates. As in defamation and disruption, there are political threats both from within and without. Take note here that these are potential threats. We are living for the moment in the realm of the theoretical. Be careful not to mistake potential with likely or probable. Foreign nation states have the capacity to use digital weapons, think computer viruses or malware, to alter vote totals. There is little doubt of that. Whether or not one actually would is a question of international geopolitics and cyber war that is far above my pay grade. Russia has engaged in defamation and has attempted disruption, but if anyone knows if Russia has attempted subversion or plans on it, that information is kept confidential in the bowels of the NSA. Domestic actors could also attempt to fiddle with voting machines. The two most likely culprits, again, thinking theoretically, are voting system vendors or county election officials, simply due to the access they have to machines. Again, there is no evidence that subversion has ever happened in an American election. And again, this is by far the most difficult type of attack to detect, and is in fact designed not to be detectable. Although in North Carolina, as in many other states, there are a number of audits that would make the quality of attack necessary to carry out a change in vote totals that has any significant impact on an election to not be detectable, very, very difficult. It is much easier with lower risk and higher reward for foreign nation states to engage in disinformation and disruption. Subversion is dangerous if the new totals alter the outcome of the election. If the attack is detected, then the election and have the election be rerun, which would create chaos and would require significant monetary and political investment. Or if the altercation is not, if the change of votes is not immediately detected and the election is undermined. That last part is a worst case scenario because it would mean American democracy at some level is controlled by unaccounted for bad actors. The key to the different types of attacks, though, is that they blend into one another. A piece of defamation becomes disruption. A piece of disruption has the same effect as subversion. And foreign nation states could even give the impression through disinformation that they're able to subvert an election, and that would decrease trust in the election. So if Americans credibly think that a foreign actor could hack into a machine or set of machines and change a vote without anybody knowing it, which is very difficult and there are a lot of checks against it, then the American population may have less trust in American democracy. And that is the key to any type of election. It is not to get a specific political candidate in office, though that has been backed. For example, the Russian government backed Donald Trump to get into office in 2016, but that is a secondary concern. The primary concern, as shown by intelligence reports and by Comey, for example, in his testimony to the House, is that Russia has a longstanding interest in delegitimizing trust and faith in the American democratic process. Now, we are going to break down in greater detail each of these sets of threats later in the presentation and talk about what are credible issues to be concerned about in North Carolina and how to prevent them.